Have you ever known someone who seems to be angry all the time? Angry about what some other country on the other side of the world is doing, angry about the news cycle, angry at a coworker who moved to the stapler, angry at their church, angry at the neighbor's grass? If you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that uncomfortable emotions like anger exist for a reason. They exist to activate us to engage life and relationships in wise ways that actually change reality for the better. If we never felt anything, we would never fix anything. But when we see someone who is angry like that all the time, it begs the question, well, how do we know what battles to enter? How do we know when we are building something and not just burning a bridge? In particular, because this has everything to do with our peace, both internally and relationally. And today I want to show you three ways to approach battles in your life, both internally and relationally, why each one matters at different moments. And then I want to give you three questions to discern how to navigate your battles and lead a life of emotional freedom. Not long ago, I came across this verse in 1 Samuel 16:18, and as soon as I read it, I sensed God saying, pray this over your son. And it's this moment where there's a description of David long before he's the king of Israel, and there are 6 character qualities that are affirmed about him. Now, one of them is a man of war. I said, God, how do you want me to pray over my son that he would be a man of war? And very quickly it became apparent that God wants me to pray over my son that he would be a man who knows how to pick what battles to engage in. That kind of wisdom is so important when it comes to our emotional steadiness, our emotional peace, both internally, but also in our relationships. And I've realized there are really only 3 approaches to any battle in your life that you can take. And the first is this: to forget the battle. Just forget about it. Years ago, there were some friends who started debating very passionately which was better, DC or Marvel. And I remember sitting back and listening to the conversation. I mean, they had skin in the game, it felt like. They were getting so uptight about this. And I just thought, wow, that is not a world that I grew up really in. I mean, I love a good Iron Man movie or a good superhero movie, but the ins and the outs of the differences between these comic houses, I just was not interested in that battle. And there are some battles in life that we just have to forget about. What does that mean? That means we don't engage. We don't even get involved. Now, why would it be important to forget about a battle? Aren't there certain things that matter? Well, yes, but there are also certain conversations that are important just not to get distracted by. When God has given you limited resources, time, energy, headspace, even the purpose that he has called you to carry out. You're not meant to have a life that's a Walmart of all kinds of different purposes. No, he's given you a call. He's given you specific relationships and passions and gifts and allowed you to develop certain skills. And so it's important not to get distracted by certain battles that maybe even are a little bit interesting, but ultimately will pull you away from what God has called you to and how he has created you. So when would it be important to forget about a battle? Well, when there may be family drama and getting involved is only going to make things worse. Now, a lot of times things have to get worse before they get better. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of drama in family or even in friends where no one is fighting for resolution, for a better reality. Rather, they're really just fighting for retribution or to spread some kind of gossip. That's a battle that's really not worth our time or our energy. Some others might be silly debates over things that really don't matter for human flourishing. I'm not saying they're not interesting. I'm not saying they're not curious conversations, but they really have nothing to do with human flourishing. That's a good indicator that it might be a battle to forget. There's a mentor in the first century who's got a mentee named Timothy. And here's what the mentor, Paul, writes to Timothy. He says, no one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs. Now, this is an analogy. He's not literally talking about Timothy and the military. He says, but rather tries to please his commanding officer. The context here is living a life that is in line with the call of God, the purpose of God for this young man, Timothy. And the analogy is that if you're a soldier and then all of a sudden you get pulled away from what your commander has told you, well, that's going to cause all kinds of damage, not just to your platoon, but even to the mission and even to your usefulness on that team. There are moments when we need to forget the battle. Here's a second approach, and sometimes that's to flee the battle. What is that? That's when you literally set boundaries in place to distance yourself from a conversation or a debate or a temptation. Why would this be so important? Well, because some battles are won when you run. And I'm not talking about fleeing something because you're a coward, but rather because you have the courage to recognize this is going to tank me. It's a little bit different than forgetting because there's active energy in fleeing and setting up boundaries boldly, courageously. This is pre-deciding so that no temptation or distraction can sway you away from what you have been called to, or the life or the character that you know you are to build. When might this be appropriate? Well, certainly when it comes to lust and when it comes to cultivating the kind of singular focus. That's what purity means. Not just sexual in Scripture, but cultivating the kind of singular focus on the life that God is calling you to lead. This might be running away from impulsive spending and on purpose setting up boundaries in your life. I actually know a guy, he's a young adult, college age, and he on purpose shares an account with his parents because he knows he can get into impulsive seasons. This might be setting boundaries around empty pursuits, meaning, you know what, I'm pre-deciding I'm not going to go out with the guys after work because I'm going to invest my time, energy, headspace into this other pursuit over here. You're actively, boldly, courageously, even sometimes painfully, but on purpose, setting boundaries to flee the battle. What's interesting is the same mentor, a guy named Paul in the first century, tells the same mentee, a guy named Timothy, this. He says, flee the evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. So there are some battles that are won by fleeing. So you can forget the battle, you can flee the battle, but here's the third way to approach battles, and that is to fight the battle. What does that mean? That means engaging wisely to bring about a better reality. Why would we want to do this? Well, because some battles really are worth engaging in. There's just too much on the line. When might we choose to fight a battle and not forget or flee? Well, when your clean conscience is at stake. When you can imagine standing before God and you know you will be taken to task. So this might be how you invested in the character of your children. That's a battle worth engaging in, even if it feels sometimes uncomfortable or messy. Or how you fought for the relationship with your wife. That, in as much as it depends on you, is a battle that is worth fighting and engaging, even when uncomfortable or messy. Or how well you sought the good of someone in your life. If you're a leader, if you're a teacher, if you have any kind of influence, you will be taken to task for how you leveraged that to seek the good of others in your life. That same mentor, Paul, to the same mentee, Timothy, says this in a letter, 1 Timothy 6:12. He says, fight the good fight of the faith. He knows there are some battles that are worth forgetting, some battles that are worth fleeing, and some battles that are absolutely worth fighting. So how do we discern how to engage the particular battles in your life and at the end of the day cultivate both internal peace and also, in as much as it depends on us, relational peace? Well, I want to give you 3 questions that have been incredibly helpful for me and incredibly helpful for those that I have gotten to work with to discern how to engage. The first is this: what will matter in 10 years? I call this the earthly question because there are certain things that feel really triggering right now, that feel really important right now. And they might be through a certain lens. But when we take a step back and we look at the earthly timeline, when we ask what will matter in 10 years, suddenly our perspective changes. When my daughter was 5 years old, I remember we had to get out of the door and to a certain commitment that we wanted to honor by a certain time. And many parents will relate with this, but she would not get her shoes on. And she would keep playing. And she would find just about anything else to do but get her shoes and her coat on to get out the door. And part of me wanted to get a little bit more intense because, hey, we had practiced preparing her for the transition. We had given her multiple reminders, all the parenting tricks in the book. And so at this point, I wanted to raise my voice and get a little more intense and say, hey, why did you get your shoes on? And can I tell you something? Character matters. And we want her to learn wisdom and honoring her commitments. Yeah. But when I asked myself, what will matter in 10 years? Immediately my perspective shift and my approach to the battle, how I engaged, immediately shifted. And yes, I had to remind her one more time and help her get her shoes on, but not yelling at her. Because I realized the way that I show up for my daughter, the emotional safety that I create, yes, in the bigger picture of teaching her character and honoring her commitments and being on time, really matters. Emotional safety really matters. In fact, the connection that I have with her is going to serve the character that we're building in her even more than my yelling. The first question we want to ask is, what will matter in 10 years? The earthly question. The second is similar to it, but raises the stakes even more. And this is, what will matter when standing before God at the end of my life? This is what I call the eternal question. When I have wanted to not engage in certain battles, this is the question that actually helped me engage. As a leader in our church community, there are certain hard conversations that we don't really want to have, but we know we need to have. And so where naturally I would walk away or try to push down the road hard conversation because I don't really want to have it. And well, things aren't totally falling apart right now. Asking myself what will matter when I'm standing before God and taken to task as a leader in our church really helps me actually discern, no, this is a battle we need to fight. And as uncomfortable as it might be, I'm going to have this hard conversation with this individual or this couple. And I'm going to try to love him or her or them well, but I really do need to engage. That's the second question. What will matter when I'm standing before God at the end of my life? The eternal question. Here's the third question that helps us determine what approach to take when it comes to the potential battles in our life. And that is, what do I want the story of my life to be? I call this the impact question. There is a story that will be told about your life. And it could either be, oh yeah, this person was always on edge. I mean, he was getting mad about everything. She was complaining about everything. Or it could be, yeah, this person was really steady. I remember even in triggering situations, this person had the wisdom to discern how to engage. It could be this person loved me enough to have a hard conversation, and it made all the difference in my life. I'm so thankful that this person actually fought that battle. The third question that I want you to ask yourself to determine how to approach a certain battle or potential battle in your life is, what do I want the story of my life to be? Here's the deal, friends. You don't have to engage in every possible battle. In fact, when you do, you already lose the ones that matter most because you've divested your best time and energy and wisdom. Let me finish with this. God is the one who gives victory in the battles. Right now in our church, we're working through Nehemiah. And what we saw in chapter 4 is that in the face of opposition to the call that God had given and the task that the people had begun, they prayed to God. When the opposition came, they prayed. And he gave them the victory. But watch this. They still had to engage the battle. At one point, they have a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. God gives the victory, but sometimes you still got to fight the battle. You still got to decide how you're going to engage. And sometimes that's forgetting the battle. Sometimes that is fleeing the battle. And sometimes, yes, that is fighting the battle. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to leave a comment below and tell me, what is the potential battle that you are facing, and what do you know that you need to do? Is it forgetting it? Is it fleeing it? Or is it fighting it? In fact, if you want to put this into action, if you want to better discern how to make decisions now related to your peace, your emotional health, your feeling fully alive, both internally but also relationally, here's what I want you to do. I want you to join my brand new live experience. It's 1 hour a day over 3 days. Or if you get the VIP option, which I recommend, it's an extra hour each of those days to get personal feedback, questions and answers with me. I call it the Emotional Breakthrough Bootcamp. And I want to invite you to the very next one. It's coming up soon. So go to emotionalbreakthroughbootcamp.com and get your ticket before they're gone. Friend, God is your victory, but sometimes you still got to battle. You got this. Bye for now.